Global Television Network.
Nigeria's Buhari wins a second term as a president. Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un in Hanoi to discuss denuclearization. And Uganda repatriates over 50 former DRC rebels back home. Hello everyone, welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. Also coming up on the program, Africa's largest supermarket group records its worst first half performance in 10 years. And Leicester City back to winning ways as the new boss Brendan Rodgers watches on. We begin in Egypt, where a fire has reportedly killed several people and injured dozens others in Cairo's Grand train station. Let's get you an update on this developing story. CGTN's Adil Mahroui is following that for us from Cairo. Adil, can you give us an update on this story?
It's one of a tragic events that has been taking place at the Central Cairo Railroad Station, where a locomotive believed to have been under maintenance in a warehouse not far away was seen on the railroad at high speed. The locomotive crashed into the bumpers at the center of the train station, and as it crashed into the bumpers, somehow, and this is what investigators are trying to look into, somehow the diesel tank on board exploded. At least 20 Egyptians have been confirmed dead and 40 others injured because of the explosion and because of the heat generated and the fire generated after the crash. The Egyptian Prime Minister has rushed immediately to the scene. Egyptian health minister has rushed to the hospitals to check on the injured, and there is an ongoing investigation that includes all the authorities involved in the railroad activity, from the Transportation Ministry and from the Prosecutor General's office.
Adel, so investigations are ongoing to ascertain exactly what happened here, what went wrong, but what do we know about the rescue operation? How is that happening?
Immediately after the incident has been reported, about a dozen fire extinguishers vehicles have rushed to the scene of the rail station. Several dozens of ambulances have also rushed to the scene to transport the victims. Those who have been killed have been transported for autopsy, and those injured have been moved to nearby hospitals. Luckily, the Cairo train station is at the center of the city, so there are several hospitals surrounding it. So in terms of first aid and reach, it was quite immediate. It is the condition of these who are injured is some of them are quite in critical conditions, and there is a continuous update. The number of casualties, what I've mentioned, 20 killed and 40 injured, this has been just the latest confirmed report from the health ministry and from the railroad authority. That was just a few minutes ago, but the numbers have been increasing quite rapidly in the past half an hour.
All right, Adil Mahroui with that update for us from Cairo. Thank you. Let's now head to Nigeria, where incumbent President Muhammadu Buhari has been re-elected for a second term. The elections took place after a delayed poll that angered voters and raised political temperatures. The ballots were counted in all of Nigeria's 36 states. It was the second victory at the ballot box for Buhari. President Buhari has called his win another victory for Nigerian democracy.
Buhari Muhammadu of the APC scored 15,191,847 votes. Abubakar Atiku of the PDP scored 11,262,978 votes.
Muhammadu Buhari of the All Progressive Congress
having satisfied the requirements of the law and scored the highest number of votes, is hereby declared winner and is returned elected. Thank you.
Meanwhile, the African Union has commended Nigeria for a peaceful election. Talking to CGTN, the African Union Commission Deputy Chairperson Kwesi Kwate called for lasting peace even after the polls and urged winners to embrace an inclusive strategy for the sake of progress.
For us in Africa, especially in West Africa, a vibrant, democratic Nigeria is of great value to all of us. Nigeria maintains peace in ECOWAS, in ECOMOG, and when Nigeria is stable and progressive, it's able to pull the rest of Africa forward. So we're particularly happy that Nigeria went through elections peacefully, cleanly, democratically. Give or take a few hitches here and there, but it's normal with a country as large, as diverse, and as complex as Nigeria.
Well, let's take a look at how Twitter reacted to the news of President Buhari's second term.
It all started with Nigeria's Independent National Electoral Commission tweeting out the results.
And is returned elected.
President Buhari's personal assistant then tweeted a video of a calm and collected Buhari learning of his victory. Supporters and world leaders started sending congratulatory messages. Not everyone was happy with Buhari's win. Some warned Nigerians not to put too much hope in Buhari's second term, while others voiced misgivings on the electoral process.
Valid. PDP.
Independent observers, though, have not cited fraud in the polls. But nothing is complete without the Nigerian sense of humor. This Twitter user found a humorous way to incorporate President Buhari's northern Nigerian roots. Asatal, CGTN.
Well, let's now join CGTN's Deji Badmus in Lagos. Deji, so after the rescheduled elections, the results are finally out. President Buhari is re-elected in an election that has raised eyebrows, especially in terms of the voter turnout. What can you tell us about that?
Well, Beatrice, I'm not surprised that at the end of the day, only 35.6% of the voters actually turned out to vote. I covered that election too. I mean, with what I saw on the day of the election, I just knew the turnout wasn't impressive at all. So not a big surprise. And we may partly blame that for the postponement. And the fact is that, yes, we had a high number of registered voters, 84 million, and those who collected their permanent voter cards, around 72 million. But basically, some people just collected those cards, not really interested in voting, just to keep them. So it's not a good one. It's not a good one at all, because the number does not in any way come up to what we had in 2015. In 2015, turnout was put at around 43.6%, but at 35.6%, this is actually low. But that is what it is. It's not a big surprise at all.
So, Deji, at 36% turnout, that is rather low in a very populous country like Nigeria. So what has been the reaction from the opposition candidate, Atiku Abubakar? What next for him, though?
Well, Atiku Abubakar has not spoken, but his party has given the indication that it would be heading to court, because when the results were coming in, when the results were being announced yesterday and early this morning, the party had issues. At some point, the party actually asked the Independent National Electoral Commission to stop the announcement of results, that it had issues with the results. So the expectation is that since former Vice President Atiku Abubakar has not called President Buhari up till this moment to congratulate him, his party would be heading to court. But something I want to make quite clear here, Beatrice, this was a closely fought election. It is true that President Buhari won the election by around 3.9 million votes. That's quite massive. But the fact is that this was a closely fought election, President Buhari winning in 19 states and former Vice President Atiku winning in 17 states plus the Federal Capital Territory. What actually gave President Buhari victory in this election is the fact that he won in those states that has the highest number of voters, and he actually won big in those places. but all the same. Some people have said, have actually called on the former vice president to call the president to congratulate him, but he hasn't done that. So we can expect that we're going to see legal fireworks in the coming days.
All right, Deji Badmus for us there in Nigeria. Thank you. Well, the election may be over, but Nigerian President Buhari now faces a huge task of fixing the numerous challenges plaguing the country, ranging from insecurity, economic downturn and corruption. Our correspondent Phil Lihaza reports from the nation's capital, Abuja.
3 days after a tasking election in Nigeria and eventual confirmation of the incumbent president as the winner, analysts say President Buhari's first task should be to unite the country.
I expect to see a president who will really become a statesman, a leader, that will open his doors to every progressive idea, bring back patriotic fervor in the citizenry. He will also be expected to heal the wounds of those people who are feeling marginalized, who felt they've been disenfranchised. One way of dousing the tension is to form an all-inclusive government.
Nigeria is currently dealing with insecurity issues ranging from kidnapping, former herder clashes, and a decade war against insurgent group Boko Haram. A survey by the Global Peace Index in 2018 ranks Nigeria as the 5th most dangerous country in the world. Although Nigeria is Africa's largest economy, the country has struggled to maintain a steady growth since recovering from a recession in 2016. According to the World Poverty Clock, at least 1 out of every 2 Nigerians is extremely poor. Many of them voted in the weekend election and now want to see President Buhari focus on addressing their needs as he starts his second term in office.
I am sure that the high rate of insecurity in the land is attributable, highly attributable to docility, unemployment in the land. Nigeria is in dire need of sustainable growth and development, and we are not going to be able to continue to accept excuses for a long time.
However, President Buhari has reiterated his commitments to winning the war against insurgency and revamping the country's economy. He will be expected to rejig his cabinet after his second inauguration in May and deliver on all his promises to Nigerians. Phil Lihaza, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
U.S. President Donald Trump has met with Vietnamese President Nguyen Phu Trong at the presidential palace in Hanoi. The two held closed-door talks and then witnessed the signing of trade agreements. Vietjet signed an order to buy 100 new Boeing 737 MAX planes for a total price tag of $12.7 billion at list price. Trump was paying a courtesy call on his Vietnamese hosts ahead of his second meeting with the DPRK leader Kim Jong-un. He is expected to have a one-on-one meeting and dinner with Kim in a few hours. For more on that story now, I'm joined by CGTN's Hang Pen in Hanoi. President Donald Trump has met Kim Jong-un in Hanoi today. What is on the table?
Well, today we can see that we're standing right outside Kim Jong-un's hotel. That gray building with the red stripes you can see very clearly behind me is where Kim Jong-un is staying. In less than about an hour, Kim Jong-un will be likely to move outside his hotel and go all the way to meet with US President Donald Trump in the summit venue. So we are expecting some historic moment that is happening here. And we can see that reporters are already gathering here. And some of the people you can see behind me are not just reporters, but ordinary people. They're all coming here, Vietnamese local people coming here, trying to take a glimpse of that historic moment of two of the world's most important leaders coming here and meeting together for Hanoi. That's part of the history that they are taking part in. And we know that DPRK is a nuclear issue. It's definitely on top of the agenda, but there also might be talk about possibly ending the war that has been technically going on between the DPRK and South Korea and the United States for already 7 decades. So a lot of talks that we are expecting today that are going to be put on the table.
Han Peng, is there potential for a deal, though it is a historic moment? Is there potential for a deal, and what would the deal look like?
Well, of course, we are expecting the denuclearization to go a little bit forward this time, because last time it was a historic moment for Trump to meet with Kim Jong-un in Singapore. And this time, the world is expecting them not to just show friendly atmosphere, but to try to push forward the denuclearization a little bit and lift part of the sanctions in the DPRK. But it's really about a trust issue between the two countries, about who is willing to take the first step. And just this morning, US President Donald Trump has tweeted on his Twitter account that that the DPRK can be just as prosperous as Vietnam today if the Kim Jong-un is willing to give up his nukes and reconcile with the West. Because we see that Vietnam and DPRK had something similar in history. Both of them belong to the Soviet camp in the Cold War, and both of them fought bitter wars against the United States, the Vietnam War in the 1970s and the Korean War in the 1950s. But today we can see they take a very different path. Vietnam has become a prosperous, prominent emerging economy in Southeast Asia, while the DPRK is pursuing nuclear weapons and become more isolated, struggling under economic sanctions. So today, we're going to see whether today and tomorrow will somehow change the course of history right here in Hanoi. Back to you.
All right, Han Peng joining us there from Hanoi. Thank you. Well, as all eyes are on the U.S. to hammer out a roadmap of eliminating DPRK's nuclear weapons, President Trump is showing more interest on declaring an end to 7 decades of war on the Korean Peninsula. Yang Xiao has the details.
It's hard to know exactly what will come out of the second summit between the United States and DPRK, but speculation is growing that President Trump may be willing to reward his counterpart's commitments to denuclearization with a long-awaited peace treaty. First, a bit history. The brutal fighting of the Korean War ended with an armistice in 1953, so technically speaking, the war is not over. Practically, though, tensions have already eased considerably. The demilitarized zone, while still packed with weapons, remains otherwise quiet and peaceful. Peace for denuclearization. Two goals are not at odds, but many in the U.S. media worry that Trump is failing to make disarmament his top priority.
I'm not in a rush. I don't want to rush anybody.
The New York Times says Trump's role as a peacemaker is weighing too heavily on his mind, which could harm Washington's core goal of eliminating Pyongyang's nuclear arsenal. At the same time, ending the war is a long-standing goal for the DPRK because it would increase the pressure on Washington to lift its heavy sanctions. It would be also attractive to South Korea too, which is eager to expand its business ties with its northern neighbor. Trump himself also seems personally invested in seeing a peace treaty through. Since last year's Singapore summit, his administration has emphasized the peace on the Korean Peninsula as the key goal of its diplomacy. But the issue raises thorny questions for Washington, including whether it would hasten the withdrawal of American troops from South Korea. And what's more, a formal peace treaty would raise complicated legal issues and may require ratification from the U.S. Senate. Yang Zhao, CGTN.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. Uganda repatriates over 50 former DRC rebels back home. Later on, we see how a growing number of African-inspired recipes are exciting American taste buds.
Africa Live. Find your voice. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Uganda has repatriated 57 former Democratic Republic of Congo rebels back home for disarmament and reintegration. The former fighters of the M23 movement had sought refuge in Uganda after a ceasefire agreement that ended their activities and control of the eastern DRC town of Goma in 2013. CGTN's Michael Baleke tells us more.
Going home after 5 years in exile, Ugandan officials handed the former rebel combatants, together with their dependents, to the DRC ambassador at Entebbe International Airport. The ex-fighters have been living in military-run camps in western Uganda, awaiting amnesty granted to them under the 2013 peace deal. Once in the DRC, the former rebels will be rehabilitated before reintegrating them into the community or back into the army for those who wish to serve.
those people that accept themselves voluntarily to go back home. This is the good sign. And we want to tell the one remaining in the camp to make the decision now to come to their country.
The move follows the bilateral agreement in 2014, which provided for the repatriation of the former combatants who were willing to go back home under the disarmament, demobilization and reintegration arrangement. More than 200 ex-combatants have so far returned home under the program.
It is very important because having ex-fighters in the region, in countries which are not their own, is a security matter. So when we see them going back to their country, it's a positive. It's a positive in terms of stability for the region. And that's what our president is focusing on. That's what our leaders are interested in, stability of the Great Lakes region.
More than 1,000 fighters are believed to have fled into Uganda and Rwanda after Congolese and UN forces quashed the Eastern DRC rebellion in 2013. The new DR Congo leader, President Felix Tshisekedi, vowed to reconcile the country, calling upon all rebel groups to surrender and work for the development of the country. The DRC government hopes such a move will promote peace and development, but also prevent the defeated insurgents from regrouping. Michael Baleke, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
On to Somalia now, and the country is mourning after a deadly attack in the south of the capital, Mogadishu, that claimed 9 lives. Al-Shabaab has been blamed for the indiscriminate attack that comes amid an increase in military operations by allied forces. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bello has more now from Mogadishu.
The latest attack happened in Lafole, a suburb along the road linking Mogadishu and Afgoye. Witnesses say that gunmen inside a vehicle opened fire on a group of people participating in a cleanup exercise, killing 9, among them 6 women and 3 men. So far, there's been no claim of responsibility, but authorities blame the militant group Al-Shabaab for the killings, an attack that has sent shockwaves across the country.
This is an issue that must be addressed with unity by all members of the society. The enemies of peace have revealed their true character through explosions, beheadings and assassination. We must unite and fight the enemies of peace, or else we will not live in peace.
The victims are participating in a voluntary program known as Ishilqan, a local initiative that rallies the public to support in the rebuilding efforts of the country after decades of conflict. Security officials say the militants were angered after locals destroyed bushes along the road that the group uses as a cover to plant explosives and other roadside bombs, mostly targeting security personnel and African Union troops. Last week, the federal government of Somalia laid the foundation for the construction of a 30-kilometer stretch of road linking the capital, Mogadishu, and the rich agricultural town of Afgoye. The project is expected to be completed by the end of the year and will boost trade for local farmers in the region. Militant group Al-Shabaab has repeatedly attacked Afgoye town as it seeks to block the supply of agricultural produce to some of the biggest markets here in Mogadishu. Government forces have also come under attack in the rural farmlands on the outskirts of the capital, prompting the US military to increase its aerial offensive in that region of the country. 5 new strikes in the Lower Shabelle and Hiran region killed at least 37 militants this week and destroyed a taxation point used by the group to extort money from the business community. The US Africa Command says the strikes in Hiran region targeted heavily armed militants transitioning between locations in a rural area east of Beledweyne town. Ethiopian and Djiboutian troops provide security in that part of the country. Mogadishu says an increase in aerial attacks has put immense pressure on the group and reduced its attacking capability. But the Al-Qaeda-linked group continues to attack soft targets and civilians in the capital, with its most recent target a veteran member of parliament. Abdulaziz Bello, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Let's now take a look at Africa's business this hour. Here's what's ahead. Africa's largest supermarket group records its worst first-half performance in 10 years.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Africa's largest supermarket group, ShopRite Holdings, says its outlook could improve after its worst first-half performance in more than a decade. The chain has been hit by deflation in South Africa and a currency devaluation in Angola. South African retailers have struggled to lift earnings at home as high unemployment and household debt have squeezed consumer income. And still in South Africa, the labour market continues to create high unemployment levels for the youth in the country. The current unemployment rate for the youth stands at 38.2%. Most experts believe there should also be a shift in mindset from a majority of young people who attempt to enter the labour market. CGTN's Travis Andrews has this report.
They took to the streets to let their voices be heard. Students wanted free higher education for all. But graduate unemployment in South Africa remains seriously high. Graduate unemployment currently sits at 33.5% for those aged between 15 and 24, and 10.2% amongst the ages of 25 to 34, which means there's not enough jobs in the market, even for educated youth.
One of the biggest problems with our education system at the moment, and I think globally, is that we're still training young people for the world of work, for them to go and seek jobs rather than create jobs and create enterprises. So yes, there is definitely a need to change the way in which we teach, and the need to focus more into artisanal kind of interventions where young people can learn to really go out there and really create new enterprises that will really see us into the future.
Most agree there is a shortage of artisans in the country, which are skills that are one of the bedrocks that underpin the economy, including the green economy. Cape Town's youth are already showing an appreciation for creating their own opportunities, be it in tech startups or the green space. This is where the new opportunities for job creation actually lie.
The green economy is a new and emerging sector, and there's a lot of new innovative ideas that are needed to really catalyze action in that particular space. And what I've observed is that young people have got the energy, they've got the imagination to really come up with solutions that can be applied, that are future-proofed and can withstand the test of time.
The green tech sector will increasingly become a player in job creation as the Western Cape begins to position itself as the industry's hub, which is already drawing in foreign direct investment. The Western Cape government is attempting to develop the economy for the future and want to create 50,000 jobs every year through a skills development program.
There is a massive demand for qualified artisans. Now, you know, the maths and science skills along the West Coast have been incredibly poor for a number of years. So the government has had to take a focused intervention into that space to try and bring up the artisans that we actually need. And I think it's around about 14,000 artisans are needed in the Western Cape going forward.
The country's future, though, begins at schools around the country, where the most important intervention is needed and where artisanal training and development should increasingly play a more important role as South Africa's real job creators. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Egypt says its electricity sharing project with Sudan is now ready. A deal was signed between both countries 2 years ago. Since then, infrastructure has been improved to pave the way for the new power project. CGTN's Yasa Hakim has more.
It's been a year in the making. Once Sudan is ready, Egypt plans to export about 40 megawatts of electricity as a testing period at the end of the month. The project is on 2 phases. Egypt would supply Sudan with 300 megawatts in the first phase this year, and up to 3,000 megawatts starting 2020.
We have large reserves of electricity in our grid, and one of the main aspects to benefit from it is through exporting to become a regional energy hub in Africa on one side and Europe on the other. This project will help in the economic development of Sudan and other African countries which suffer from a shortage of energy.
Egypt has constructed 300 electricity towers over 100 kilometers to supply electricity to its neighbor. The project costs about $75 million. Egypt will sell electricity at the subsidized local market price of about 5 cents per kilowatt hour. But Cairo is willing not to receive cash payments from its southern neighbor.
Sudan has multiple economic issues, including high unemployment and low investment rates. Sudan prefers to export products such as livestock and agricultural goods instead of cash payments to Egypt in return for energy. Egypt has agreed to this formula and is willing to do the same with any other African nation that wants to invest with Egypt.
The government hopes this project will be the link to power sharing with other African countries, as Chad, Eritrea and South Sudan are next in line. Egypt is trying to make optimum use of the surplus in its electricity production. Similar power sharing projects are in the pipeline with Saudi Arabia, Jordan and Cyprus. Yas Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
The hunt for scarce fuel is on again for motorists in Zimbabwe as the country endures yet another shortage. On Monday, hundreds of commuters were left stranded after public transport operators hiked fares due to the latest deficiencies. Faram Wakutuya has a story.
After a 150% price hike that sparked violent protests in January, fuel supplies looked to have stabilized. But persistent foreign currency woes have led motorists into queues that have resurfaced since the weekend. State-subsidized public transport has been disrupted, while other fuel-dependent businesses are reeling.
I've lost a load.
I have lost a load I was meant to get yesterday. And will probably lose another one I had lined up today too. It's bad. It's really bad.
It's bad, Baba. It's really bad, yeah.
Because the fuel station is limiting diesel to just 100 liters per vehicle, this driver says he's had to rejoin the queue to fill up his 480-liter tank.
I would rather stay here and find fuel because it would be pointless for me to go to work if I don't have enough.
That's how complicated it is.
The latest shortage has taken some motorists by surprise.
We heard recently in the press that the country has enough fuel, but when we get to the fuel stations, we don't find it. Maybe the authorities who keep telling us there is fuel should explain where it is.
Energy Minister Joram Gumbo has previously said there are adequate fuel stocks being held in bond within the country, which suppliers will release upon receiving payment in hard currency. In its recently announced monetary policy statement, Zimbabwe's central bank maintained an arrangement where it retains a percentage of exporters' foreign currency earnings to fund critical supplies such as fuel. It hopes higher export receipts on the back of new currency reforms will shore up its critically low foreign currency reserves and improve fuel supply. However, some who are waiting in long queues believe a broader solution is required.
I think dialogue should be open. It shouldn't be selective. They should engage everyone and sit down and talk about these issues. Because everyone has an angle of how this issue should be addressed.
President Emmerson Mnangagwa has initiated a multi-party dialogue aimed at addressing social and economic challenges besetting the country. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's ahead. see how a growing number of African-inspired recipes are exciting American taste buds.
For lucrative economic data out of the country, the country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
Reporting from Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In New York, pizza and bagels have become staple foods of the city, but both were introduced decades ago by immigrants. Now, a growing number of Africans inspired by traditional recipes from their homelands are bringing flavors from the continent to the American public. And in a city always on the move, they are finding that fast, convenient food and drinks are a strong selling point. CGTN's Nick Harper reports from New York.
Causing a stir in the American drinks industry. When the Diallo brothers moved from Guinea to the US, they were surprised by the lack of African flavours on supermarket shelves. They've now turned their mother's ginger juice recipe, a West African favourite, into a marketable drink.
It is something that has been around for thousands of years and something that we love drinking, and it's rooted to Africa and it's there for everyone.
They wanted a drink that health-conscious consumers would enjoy, but that was also distinctly African in its taste and design.
It's important to us to communicate that to people so that they know we're not just, taking something we cooked up and bringing to them. We're taking something that has a lot of history, that has been used for generations, right? And that there's something, it's anchored into something, and it's not just a marketing gimmick.
Staying true to their roots has already proved a recipe for success. They sell ginjan in 90 stores locally, including Whole Foods, and hope to go nationwide. Another African entrepreneur is Z Kumbulu. He's bringing the on-the-go fast food element to his fusion flavours and combining them all in a traditionally Mexican taco.
If I walk up to someone who's never tried African food before, they're scared to try African food because they think it's gooey, they think it's very spicy. And I tell them, look, there's a taco. I feel like almost automatically they're drawn to want to try it.
He's found his portable product, in a recognizable taco form, is the perfect icebreaker for nervous American diners and expat Africans alike.
The food is not just food, it nourishes you, you get nutrition out of it, you get flavor, but it also triggers memory. It brings you back home in a place where you may not be directly home.
These flavors and spices are undeniably very different to what American palates are used to, but the tastemakers here in New York hope that all of these will help to broaden culinary horizons and open people up to the traditions and cuisines of the African continent. Nick Harper, CGTN, New York.
In Burkina Faso, the prelude to the Pan-African Film Festival of Ouagadougou kicked off. The Chinese embassy organized a screening of a Chinese comic film at the National Center for Performing and Audiovisual Arts in Ouagadougou. Kung Fu Yoga was screened during this event in celebration of the platform for cultural exchange. The screening of this movie in Burkina Faso was intended to announce a China-Africa co-production project that will soon take place in the country.
A great Chinese filmmaker came here to Burkina Faso with a small team of filmmakers who will make a film about the country and about the Burkinabe people. He will film everything that will happen here so that the Chinese people can get to know the Burkinabe people better through their culture, their tradition and their landscape. It will also show the common aspirations of the Burkinabe people for prosperity, security and happiness forever.
We want the Chinese culture and imagination of these great people to go beyond China's borders and find themselves here in Africa, and precisely in Burkina Faso. In the context of the 26th edition of FESPACO, which marks the 50th anniversary of the FESPACO. As FESPACO celebrates its 50th anniversary, it can only be pleased that there are opportunities in the field of film co-production.
I think this movie also belongs in the FESPACO. It will allow us Burkinabe to get to know Chinese people and cultural diversity a little better.
And your sports news coming up next. Here's what's ahead. Leicester City back to winning ways as the new boss Brendan Rodgers watches on.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way. Match Point, only on